The massive council chamber stretched out like a cathedral of glass and steel, its walls reaching toward a dome that showed the swirling nebulas of deep space. Commander Talvik of the Altarian Defense Corps sat at the curved table, his reptilian frame rigid with tension. His scaled fingers, each tipped with a natural claw, drummed a nervous rhythm against the smooth crystalline surface. The sound echoed softly in the vast chamber, but no one seemed to notice. Around him, greatest minds of 12 different species argued with the passion of politicians and the fury of warriors. The air hummed with translation devices, creating a symphony of alien languages that blended into one chaotic chorus. Talvik had attended hundreds of these meetings over his 40-year career, but today felt different. Today, they were deciding the fate of humanity. Ambassador Crix of the Vorthan Collective rose from his floating chair, his 6 tentacles writhing with barely contained disgust. His skin shifted from deep purple to angry red as he spoke. "Humans are nothing but warmongers," he declared, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never seen real battle. Their recent conflicts with the Kepler colonies proved they're too violent for civilized space. The holographic displays around the chamber flickered to life, showing footage of human military operations. Explosions bloomed like deadly flowers. Across alien landscapes, human soldiers moved with practiced efficiency, their weapons cutting through enemy lines with surgical precision. To most in the chamber, it looked like mindless violence. General Mordok of the Centauri Federation, a massive, bear-like creature with silver fur and eyes like burning coals, nodded his enormous head. His voice rumbled like distant thunder, agreed completely. Their military records show constant warfare spanning 3 centuries. We cannot allow such savagery into our alliance. He gestured toward the displays with one massive paw. Their tactics, brutal, efficient, they show no mercy to their enemies. Counselor Zephyra of the Ethereal Collective, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline form, pulsed with agreement. Their neural patterns show aggressive tendencies. Far beyond normal parameters, they are a species built for war. Talvik remained silent, his amber eyes fixed on the holographic displays. But where others saw brutality, he saw something else entirely. Something that made his stomach twist with remembered terror and his heart's race with an emotion he couldn't name. The footage showed human medics treating wounded enemies. It showed soldiers risking their lives to evacuate civilians. It showed acts of mercy that defied military logic. 23 years ago, during the Altarian border war, he had been captured by human forces. The memory still haunted his dreams. He was the only being in this chamber who had actually fought against humanity, who had seen their true nature up close. And more importantly, he was the only one who had survived to tell about it. The debate raged on around him. Species after species stood to voice their opposition. The crystalline hegemony spoke of human aggression. The Voidwalkers warned of their unpredictable nature. The binary collective calculated the statistical probability of human violence, disrupting galactic peace. But Talvik heard none of it. His mind was elsewhere, trapped in memories he had spent decades trying to forget. The metallic smell of human technology still seemed to cling to his nostrils. The strange, rhythmic cadence of their language still echoed in his ears. He could still feel the weight of human kindness, so alien and terrifying that it had shattered everything he thought he knew about warfare. "Commander Talvik," called Chancellor Vexstar from the central podium, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. The ancient being's 3 eyes focused on him with uncomfortable intensity. "Your species had the most extensive contact with human military forces during the border conflicts. What is your assessment?" The chamber fell silent. Every eye sensor and consciousness focused on Talvik. He felt their attention like a physical weight pressing down on his shoulders. His throat went dry, and his secondary hearts began beating faster. The memories he had buried for decades began to surface, unbidden and unwelcome. He could still smell it. The metallic tang of human technology mixed with something else. Something clean and antiseptic that spoke of medical care and healing. Could still hear the strange, rhythmic language they spoke among themselves. Not the harsh barks of conquest he had expected, but something almost musical, something that sounded like compassion. Talvek's voice cracked. He cleared his throat and tried again. I need time to prepare my report. The words felt like stones in his mouth. Round him, the other delegates shifted impatiently. They wanted his expertise, his first-hand knowledge of human warfare. They wanted him to confirm their fears, to validate their decision to reject humanity's application. But how could he tell them the truth? How could he explain that the terror he felt wasn't from human brutality, but from human mercy? How could he make them understand that everything they believed about warfare, about strength, about civilization itself was wrong? The Chancellor nodded slowly. Very well. We will reconvene tomorrow for your full report. As the session ended, and the delegates began to file out, Talvek remained seated, staring at the displays that still showed human military operations. Tomorrow, he would have to speak. Tomorrow, he would have to relive the memories that had haunted him for over 2 decades. Tomorrow, he would have to tell them about the day a human soldier died, saving his life. That night, alone in his quarters, aboard the diplomatic station, Talvek sat by the massive viewport staring out at the stars. The council chamber's artificial lights had been replaced by the cold, distant glow of 1,000 suns. His reflection stared back at him from the reinforced glass, showing the scars that crisscrossed his scaled face. Battle scars from a war that had ended decades ago. But the deeper wounds remained hidden. He poured himself a glass of Altarian wine, the blue liquid glowing softly in the dim light. His hands trembled slightly as he raised it to his lips. The alcohol burned, but it couldn't wash away the memories that crashed over him like a tidal wave. The capture had been swift and brutal. His reconnaissance unit, 6 of the Altarian Defense Corps' finest soldiers, had been caught deep in human territory during what should have been a routine patrol. They had been tracking human supply lines, gathering intelligence for the war effort. The mission had seemed simple enough. They had been wrong. The humans had detected their cloaked ship 3 light minutes out from the target zone. Advanced sensor. Arrays that shouldn't have existed picked up their approach, and when the ambush came, it was like nothing Talvek had ever experienced. Human fighters appeared from nowhere, moving with impossible coordination. Their weapons were precise, surgical. They disabled the Altarian ship's engines without destroying it, something that required incredible skill and restraint. Within minutes, his entire unit was captured. Talvek had expected immediate execution. It was standard procedure among most galactic civilizations. Prisoners were either killed on the spot or taken for interrogation and torture before being disposed of. The Altarian military certainly operated that way. The Vorthon Collective was even worse, using captured enemies for biological experiments. Instead, they had been processed. The human soldiers who boarded their disabled ship moved with military precision. But something was different. They wore strange markings on their armor, red crosses that Talvek later learned meant medical personnel. They checked his wounded soldiers for injuries before securing them. When Private Kethrin had been hit by shrapnel during the attack, the humans immediately began treating his wounds. The transport to the human base took 6 hours. During that time, Talvek watched in growing confusion as human medics worked to save Kethrin's life. Why heal an enemy you plan to execute? It made no tactical sense. The base itself was a marvel of human engineering. It's built into the side of a mountain. It was both fortress and city. Defensive turrets tracked their approach, but the landing bay was clean and well lit. Human soldiers stood at attention as they disembarked, their weapons ready, but not aimed. Everything about the facility spoke of military efficiency, but also of something else, something that took Talvek time to recognize. The human base commander, Colonel Kim Hyjin, had personally overseen their arrival. She was a small woman by human standards, but her presence filled the room. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe style, and her uniform was crisp and professional. When she spoke, her voice carried absolute authority through a translation device. She had explained something called the Geneva Conventions, ancient human laws, she said, governing the treatment of prisoners of war. The translator struggled with some of the concepts, as if they didn't exist in Altarian culture. You will be treated with dignity, she had said, her dark eyes strangely gentle for a military commander. Your families will be notified of your capture. You will receive medical care and adequate provisions. Talvik had been certain it was psychological torture, a prelude to something worse. Every military manual he had studied spoke of such tactics. Break the enemy's will through false kindness, then extract information through brutality. He waited for the other shoe to drop, but days passed, then weeks. Human guards brought them food that was not only edible, but actually good. They received books, entertainment materials, even recreational equipment. The prison compound had a courtyard where they could exercise under the alien sun. Medical staff checked on them regularly, treating everything from minor injuries to chronic conditions. A young medic named Park Min-ho had treated Talvik's wounds with the same care he gave human patients. The young man spoke broken Altarian, learned from language programs, and always asked about Talvik's comfort. When infection set in around the shrapnel wounds, Min-ho worked for hours to save Talvik's arm. Why, Talvik had asked one day. Frustrated by the contradiction between expectation and reality, Min-ho had looked confused. Why what? Why heal your enemies? The young human had thought about it for a moment, then smiled. Because you're not just enemies. You're people. You have families who love you. You have dreams and fears just like us. The terror hadn't come from cruelty. It had come from kindness. These humans were supposed to be primitive, violent creatures, according to every intelligence report. Every military briefing, every cultural study, they were nothing more than aggressive animals with advanced technology. Yet they showed mercy to enemies, followed moral codes that seemed to make no tactical sense whatsoever. Talvik watched. Human soldiers play games with the captured Altarian younglings who had been taken during border skirmishes. The humans shared pictures of their own children, taught the young Altarians human games, and told them stories. Some of the guards had children the same age back home, and their faces lit up when they talked about them. It was horrifying in its impossibility. Everything Talvik had been taught about warfare, about strength, about what it meant to be a soldier, crumbled in the face of human compassion. These creatures followed rules that made them weaker in battle, but stronger in spirit. They cared for their enemies as if they were family, and that terrified him more than any torture ever could. The worst memory came, flooding back like a dam bursting in his mind. Talvik set down his wine glass with shaking hands, the blue liquid sloshing dangerously close to the rim. Even after all these years, this particular memory had the power to bring him to his knees. It was the one that had shattered his understanding of warfare forever. The attack had come at dawn, just as the twin suns of Kepler 442 painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Talvik had been awake, as he always was at that hour, staring through the barred window of his cell at the alien sunrise. The human base had been quiet, with only the distant hum of machinery and the soft footsteps of guards making their rounds. Then the sirens began to wail. The sound was unlike anything in Altarian military protocol. It wasn't the harsh, commanding blare of a battle alarm, but something almost mournful. Later, Talvik would learn that human alarms were designed to warn, not to intimidate. Even in crisis, they showed restraint. Human forces had discovered the location of their captured soldiers and launched a rescue operation. The intelligence had been good, pinpointing the exact location of the mountain fortress. What followed was a masterclass in military precision that left Talvik speechless. The first wave came from above. Human dropships, sleek and deadly, descended from the clouds like mechanical angels of death. Their engines screamed as they dove toward the base, weapons blazing, but their targets were specific, surgical. They hit defensive positions, communications arrays, and weapon emplacements. Nothing else. Talvik had expected the alien prisoners to be abandoned or executed to prevent intelligence leaks. It was standard military procedure across the galaxy. When rescue operations began, prisoners became liabilities. The logical choice was to eliminate them quickly and focus on recovering your own people. Instead, the impossible happened. The prison compound shook as explosions rocked the outer defenses. Through the reinforced walls, Talvik could hear the distinctive whine of human plasma weapons and the heavier thump of their kinetic cannons. The battle was moving closer, and fast. Then the doors burst open. Sergeant Lee Yun-soo led the rescue team into the compound with the kind of precision that spoke of countless hours of training. He moved like a dancer, his weapon tracking smoothly as he cleared each corner. Behind him, 6 human soldiers followed in perfect formation, their armor gleaming under the emergency lighting. But instead of ignoring the alien prisoners, instead of leaving them to die or executing them to prevent intelligence leaks, Yunus did something that defied every military manual Talvek had ever read. He shouted orders to evacuate everyone. All prisoners moved to the extraction point. Now, his voice carried absolute authority, but also something else. Urgency. Not the urgency of a soldier trying to complete a mission, but the urgency of someone trying to save lives. Talvek hesitated, confused by the human's actions. This had to be a trick. Some kind of psychological warfare he didn't understand. Why would they save their enemies? It made no tactical sense. The other Altarian prisoners looked equally bewildered. Private Kethrin, still weak from his injuries, struggled to his feet. Alwa, the young medic Park Minho, appeared at his side, supporting him with practiced ease. "Come on," Minho said in broken Altarian. "We leave together." That was when the second wave of the attack hit. The explosion came from above, where human forces had breached the upper levels of the fortress. Talvek looked up just in time to see a massive section of the ceiling break away, twisted metal and chunks of concrete falling toward him like deadly rain. He couldn't move. His body was frozen with the sudden realization that he was about to die, not in glorious battle, not defending his homeworld, but crushed like an insect in an enemy prison. The irony would have been laughable if it wasn't so terrifying. Then something slammed into him from the side. The impact sent him sprawling across the floor, his scaled skin scraping against the rough concrete. He rolled and came up gasping, debris crashing down where he had been standing just moments before. Dust filled the air, making it hard to see, but he could make out a figure pinned beneath a massive piece of twisted metal. It was a young human soldier. A woman, barely out of her teens, wearing the same armor as the rescue team, named tag read Choi So-young. She had thrown herself between Talvik and the falling debris, taking the full impact of the collapse. She was dying. Talvek crawled toward her, his hands shaking as he tried to lift the metal beam that had crushed her chest. It was hopeless. The weight was too much, and even if he could move it, the damage was too severe. Blood frothed at the corners of her mouth, and her breathing was shallow and labored. "Why?" he whispered, cradling her broken body. "Why did you save me?" Her eyes, brown like earth and surprisingly gentle, focused on his face. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper, but the words cut through him like a blade. "Goes home." She died in his arms, still smiling. A human had died saving her enemy. The rescue operation continued around them with ruthless efficiency. Sergeant Yunsu's team moved through the compound like a well-oiled machine, evacuating human prisoners and alien captives alike. They worked under fire, carrying wounded soldiers and supporting those who couldn't walk. When they reached Talvek and saw Young, they didn't hesitate. "Sir, we need to move," one of the soldiers said, his voice tight with emotion behind his helmet. Talvek looked down at the young woman's body, then up at the humans who had come to save them all. "I'll carry her," he said. No one questioned it. They helped him lift So-young's lifeless form, and together they moved toward the extraction point. The human soldiers wept openly for their fallen comrade, but they never stopped moving. They had a job to do, and they would see it through. Rescue succeeded. Every human prisoner was recovered, and somehow, impossibly, so was every alien captive. Even in the chaos of battle, under enemy fire, with their own people dying around them, the humans had maintained their incomprehensible moral standards. They saved everyone. Talvek's hands shook as he remembered carrying So-young's body to the extraction point. Human soldiers weeping openly for their fallen comrade, who had died saving an enemy. In that moment he understood that everything he had been taught about warfare, about strength, about what it meant to be a soldier, was wrong. The humans weren't just warriors. They were something else entirely. something that terrified him more than any weapon ever could. They were good. The next morning, Talvek returned to the council chamber with heavy steps. He had barely slept, his mind replaying memories that felt as fresh as yesterday. The vast chamber buzzed with activity as delegates from across the galaxy took their seats. The air was thick with tension and the smell of different atmospheric mixtures that each species required. The debate had intensified overnight. News feeds from across the galaxy showed protests on various worlds. Some species demanded human inclusion, while others called for total isolation. The chamber's holographic displays showed footage from 3 different star systems, where human forces had recently been involved in conflicts. Ambassador Crix of the Vorthon Collective was already on his feet, his purple skin flushed with anger. His 6 tentacles writhed as he gestured toward the displays. Their aggression is well documented, he insisted, his voice carrying across the chamber. They've been involved in conflicts across 3 systems: the Kepler incident, the Proxima blockade, the Titan mining dispute. Every time, violence follows. The displays shifted to show human warships in battle formation. Massive vessels with sleek lines and weapons that could crack planets. To anyone watching, they looked like instruments of destruction. The footage showed human Marines in combat, their movements precise and deadly. General Mordok of the Centauri Federation stood, his massive frame casting a shadow across his section of the chamber. His silver fur bristled with indignation. "Look at their military structure," he rumbled. "They have more weapons per capita than any species in known space. Their entire culture is built around conflict." Counselor Zephyra pulsed with agreement, her crystalline form glowing brighter. "Our psychological analysis shows inherent aggressive tendencies. They solve problems through force, not diplomacy." The insectoid hive mind buzzed in unison. Consensus achieved. Humans represent threat to galactic stability.
Recommendation.
Permanent quarantine. More voices joined the chorus. The Aquatic Federation spoke of human contamination of water worlds. The Silicon Coalition complained about human mining operations. The energy beings warned of human disruption of cosmic harmony. Chancellor Vexstar raised his hand for silence. His ancient voice carried the weight of millennia. "The evidence seems overwhelming. The human species has demonstrated consistent patterns of aggressive behavior." He paused, scanning the chamber. "Before we proceed to the final vote, are there any final statements?" "Motion to reject the human application," declared General Mordok. "All in favor?" The response was immediate. Hands, tentacles, pseudopods, and energy signatures rose across the chamber in a wave of rejection. The Vorthon delegation voted as one. The Centauri Federation's massive paws were raised high. The crystalline collective pulsed with unanimous agreement. Talvek watched the vote with growing dread. He counted the raised appendages, the glowing indicators, the unified voices. The rejection was overwhelming. 97% of the Galactic Alliance was voting to exclude humanity from civilized space. "Any opposed?" Chancellor Vexstar asked formally, though his tone suggested he expected no response. Talvek's hand trembled as he raised it. The movement felt like lifting a mountain, made every muscle in his body screamed against it. He was going against everything his military training had taught him. He was contradicting his own people's vote. The chamber fell silent like a tomb. Every eye, sensor, and consciousness in the chamber turned to him. The weight of their attention was crushing. He could feel the disapproval, the confusion, the anger radiating from hundreds of alien minds. His own delegation stared at him in shock. Ambassador Kextel of Alteria looked like he had been struck by lightning. "Commander Talvek," the Chancellor said, his voice heavy with surprise.
"You wish to speak?"
Talvek rose slowly, his legs unsteady. Beneath him, the chamber seemed to spin around him. He gripped the edge of the table for support, his claws scraping against the crystalline surface. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "Yes, Chancellor, I wish to speak about human warfare." The chamber erupted in murmurs. Some delegates leaned forward with interest. Others sat back in disgust. The Vorthon delegation's tentacles writhed. "With agitation? You want to know about human warfare?" Talvik's voice grew stronger as he spoke. I'll tell you about human warfare. I was captured by human forces during the border war. I spent 4 months in their custody. He paused, letting the words sink in. Several delegates gasped. Being captured by humans and surviving was almost unheard of. Most species assumed that human prisoners were tortured and executed. Expected torture, execution, experimentation. Instead, I witnessed something that still haunts me. The chamber fell completely silent. Even the ambient hum of the environmental systems seemed to fade. Every being in the room was hanging on his words. These humans have achieved something we thought impossible. They have learned to wage war while maintaining their souls. Ambassador Crix's tentacles stopped writhing. General Mordok's ears perked up with interest. Even the energy beings seemed to focus their attention more intently. They treat enemies with dignity, Talvik continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. They follow moral codes that make no tactical sense. They risk their lives to save those who would kill them. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of beings who had voted to condemn humanity. I watched human soldiers share their food with enemy prisoners. I saw them risk their lives to evacuate wounded aliens. I witnessed acts of mercy that defied every military manual I had ever read. The silence in the chamber was deafening. Human soldier died saving my life. Talvik's voice cracked with emotion. Her name was Choi So-young. She was 19 years old, barely more than a child. She threw herself between me and death because her people believe that everyone deserves to go home. He paused, wiping moisture from his eyes. She died with a smile on her face, knowing that she had saved the life of her enemy. The chamber remained silent, but Talvik could see the change in their faces. Some delegates looked thoughtful, others appeared shaken. The certainty that had filled the room moments before was beginning to crack. Call them warmongers, Talvik said, his voice now carrying clearly to every corner of the chamber. But I have seen their true nature. They are not warriors who have learned to show mercy. They are people who have learned to fight while remaining human. He looked directly at Chancellor Vexstar. The question is not whether they deserve to join us. The question is whether we deserve to learn from them. The chamber erupted in chaos as delegates began arguing among themselves. Some demanded more information. Others called for a new vote. The careful order of the morning had dissolved into passionate debate, but Talvik remained standing. His hands still raised in opposition, carrying the weight of a dead human soldier's sacrifice and the hope that someday the galaxy might understand what he had learned in that prison camp so long ago. The council chamber erupted in shocked murmurs that rolled across the vast space like thunder. Delegates turned to each other, their voices mixing into a cacophony of confusion and disbelief. The carefully maintained order of the morning had shattered like glass, leaving behind raw emotion and uncomfortable truths. Talvik continued, his voice growing steadier with each word. The tremor that had plagued him for decades seemed to fade. As he spoke, you call them violent? Yes, they fight wars. But they fight them with honor we cannot comprehend. They have laws they follow, even when it costs them tactical advantage. He gestured toward the holographic displays that still showed human military operations. Look closer at that footage. Really look. You'll see human soldiers risking their lives to evacuate enemy civilians. You'll see medics treating wounded opponents with the same care they give their own troops. You'll see acts of mercy that would be considered weakness by any other species. The chamber's atmosphere had changed, where before there had been certainty. Now, there was doubt. Delegates who had voted with absolute conviction moments earlier now looked uncertain, their previous assumptions crumbling under the weight of first-hand testimony. They show mercy to enemies, Talvik continued, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. They protect civilians, even when those civilians belong to species trying to destroy them. They treat prisoners better than we treat our own. Citizens Ambassador Crix's tentacles writhed nervously, their usual confident purple color fading to a sickly gray. This is impossible, he stammered. No species can be so. So what? Talvik demanded, his amber eyes blazing with newfound purpose, so moral, so principled, so terrifyingly decent that it makes the rest of us look like barbarians. The word hung in the air like a physical presence. Barbarians. The accusation cut deep because it rang true. How many of them had ordered the execution of prisoners? How many had sacrificed civilian populations for tactical advantage?
How many
had committed acts in the name of military necessity that would horrify these humans? General Mordok shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his massive frame suddenly seeming smaller. The Centauri Federation's military doctrine included the routine execution of enemy prisoners to prevent intelligence leaks. It was considered standard practice, logical and efficient. But now, faced with the reality of human behavior, it seemed monstrous. "I've spent 23 years trying to understand what I witnessed," Talvek said, his voice filled with the weight of those decades. "The terror I felt wasn't from human brutality. It was from recognizing that we are the primitive ones, we are the savages." The silence that followed was deafening. Species that had considered themselves the pinnacle of galactic civilization were forced to confront an uncomfortable truth: that advanced technology, vast knowledge, and sophisticated cultures. But they had never evolved beyond the basic brutality of survival. Chancellor Vextar leaned forward on his ancient throne, his three eyes fixed on Talvek with uncomfortable intensity. "You're saying we should admit them? I'm saying we need them," Talvek replied without hesitation. "Every species in this alliance has studied human warfare tactics, not for their weapons, for their ethics. They've evolved beyond the brutality. That defines galactic civilization." He turned to face the full assembly, his gaze sweeping across beings from 100 different worlds. "The Vorthan Collective has entire research divisions dedicated to understanding human moral codes. The Centauri Federation has tried to implement human prisoner treatment protocols. The Crystalline Collective has studied human compassion algorithms." Several delegates shifted uncomfortably, knowing that their secret research programs were being exposed, but none denied it. The evidence was too overwhelming. "The question isn't whether humanity deserves to join us," Talvek continued, his voice now carrying the authority of absolute truth. "The question is whether we deserve to learn from them." The chamber fell silent for a long moment. The weight of the decision pressed down on everyone present. Now, this wasn't just about admitting a new species to the Alliance. This was about confronting their own failures, their own barbarism, their own inability to evolve beyond the brutality of their ancestors. Counselor Zephyra pulsed with a different light, her crystalline form now glowing with something that might have been shame. "Perhaps," she said slowly, "we have been too quick to judge." The insectoid hive mind buzzed with internal debate. Individual voices could be heard arguing within the collective consciousness. Consensus, ... uncertain. New data requires ... recalculation. One by one, delegates began to reconsider. The Aquatic Federation's representatives spoke of human efforts to clean contaminated water worlds. The Silicon Coalition mentioned human mining operations that included environmental restoration. The energy beings acknowledged human attempts to minimize cosmic disruption. Chancellor Vextar raised his hand for silence. The ancient being's voice carried millennia of wisdom and the weight of countless decisions. "In light of this new testimony, perhaps we should reconsider our position." He paused, looking around the chamber. "I call for a new vote on human membership in the Galactic Alliance." The tension in the chamber was palpable. This was history in the making. The decision would shape the future of galactic civilization. For generations to come, all in favor of human membership. This time, the hands that rose were different ones. Talvek watched as species after species reconsidered their position. The Crystalline Collective's representatives pulsed with agreement. Several Centauri delegates raised their massive paws. Even some Vorthan tentacles rose hesitantly into the air. The vote was close, but it passed. 52% in favor, enough to grant humanity membership in the Galactic Alliance. The chamber erupted in cheers and protests, but the decision was final. As the session ended and delegates began to file out, Talvek remained in his seat, overwhelmed by what had just happened. Ambassador Kextel of Alteria approached him, his expression unreadable. "You realize what you've done?" Ambassador asked. "I've told the truth." Talvek replied simply. You've changed everything. The Alliance will never be the same. Talvek nodded slowly, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. For the first time in decades, the memory of Choi So-young's sacrifice didn't fill him with terror. Instead, it filled him with hope. Perhaps there was a future where war could be waged with honor, where enemies could be treated with dignity, where everyone could go home. Perhaps humanity could teach them how to be better than they had ever imagined possible. As he walked out of the chamber, Talvek whispered a prayer to the memory of a young human soldier who had died saving her enemy. Thank you, So-young. Our sacrifice wasn't in vain. Everyone is going home. The stars outside the viewport seemed brighter somehow, filled with the promise of a better tomorrow. Humanity had been accepted into the galactic community, not despite their nature, but because of it. They would teach the galaxy what it meant to be truly civilized. The end.